I've been asked to talk about metadata at Research Data Alliance. So what I thought I would do, if I can make the slides go. That's strange. Oh, there we go. So what I wanted to do is give a brief overview of the RDA, Research Data Alliance, and then talk about the difference between working groups and interest groups, and then let you know what's happening with at least the metadata groups I'm associated with. As you'll find out, there are many groups within RDA. So RDA has actually been around since 2013. There was it began in, actually it could have been before that, but anyway, it began with a meeting in Gothenburg, Sweden. And to date, they have many working groups, interest groups. There are a lot of people involved. But the vision of RDA is for researchers and innovators to share data across disciplines, technologies, and countries. And its mission, in order to accomplish this vision, is to build the social and technical bridges for open data sharing. So it's an international organization and currently has more than 4,500 members from 115 different countries. And again, the vision is down there. The way they come together is basically self-formed and totally volunteer, working groups, interest groups, and even birds of a feather. So they collaborate on a lot of different areas. In fact, so some of them down there are reproducibility, data preservation, domain repositories and best practices for those. There are groups dealing with legal interoperability, data type registries, data citation, and actually quite a few groups dealing with metadata. So who can join RDA? Anybody. It doesn't cost individuals to join RDA, and basically all you have to do is go to their website and sign up. Organizations can support RDA, but that does cost money, and that information is actually on their website. So here's what the community, this is current as of the beginning of November. So like I said, there are 115 countries involved. It's been growing rather rapidly, as you can tell. So started out with, at the first plenary, started out with just under 1,000 members and has grown considerably. 48% of the membership is from Europe, 33% from North America, and then the rest of the countries are also shown on this pie chart. By and far, the majority of the people who belong to RDA and are active within RDA come out of the research community and academia. The next big piece of the pie is government or public services, and then it goes down from there. One of the things that they're actually trying to do is to get more businesses involved. They're working on that, so I think that's where the other comes in. So now to talk about the difference between working groups and interest groups. Working groups have to be formally approved. They have to have a very specific reason for forming. That has to fit within the RDA vision and mission. Ideally, they want international membership. And now they've actually added the part about 3 or more continents. But usually, if you have somebody from US and Europe, or Asia, Eurasia and Europe, that's good. You can have between 2 and 4 co-chairs to lead the initiative. The big thing about working groups is that you need to have an outcome that is measurable, and you only get 12 to 18 months to do this. So what you do is you submit a case statement to the technical advisory board. They review it, and if it passes them, then it is sent to the organizational board, and they review it, and then they come back and say, yes, you can do this, or here's some suggestions that we think would help your working group, and then you address those concerns, and then you can get started. But the big difference between working groups and interest groups is you only have 12 to 18 months to do things, and that for a volunteer organization, that time goes by rather rapidly. Interest groups, on the other hand, they need to write a case statement to talk about what they're going to do, but there's no timeline necessarily involved with it. They can, you have to stay active. If you haven't been active in a while, then the group can be dissolved. But once you're an interest group and your case statement has been approved, then it's up to the interest group they get a web page on the RDA website, and most interest groups set about recruiting members who are interested in a particular topic. Interest groups are also really good for they can act as an umbrella organization for spawning off working groups. So an interest group has a much wider range of interest, and then when there's something that they think that can be done within 12 to 18 months, a working group is spun off. And again, interest groups have 2 to 4 co-leads, and ideally, again, it's an international set of people, which helps with calls, so that if there's people from Australia or Europe, it's easier to have a particular co-lead lead that particular one. That's one of the difficulties of getting calls underway, is just because of the time zone differences. So RDA has quite a lot of groups, 72 groups in total. Right now there are 27 working groups and 45 interest groups, and as you might imagine, scheduling the plenaries is difficult because trying to find time for all of these groups to meet is a scheduling headache. A lot of the working groups and interest groups meet together, which helps out a lot. I'm not going to read all of the groups together, but there are domain science working groups and interest groups that focus on particular things. They have ones that are focused on community needs. Other ones are more on reference or sharing. And as you can see, you'll see metadata pop up there. There's a humanities metadata working group that's relatively new. And they're partnership ones. Again, you'll see the TADWIG metadata standards working group that is working together. So it's RDA people and people in the TADWIG metadata standards group working together. There are groups involved in data stewardship and services, and then just base infrastructure. And the metadata groups that I'm going to talk about today are the ones in the base infrastructure, the metadata standards catalog, the metadata standards directory working groups, the metadata interest group, which is the umbrella one, and then data in context interest groups. So right now the metadata interest group is led by 3 people. Alex Ball, who's from the UK, Keith Jeffrey is also from the UK, and myself from the US, and my day job is Executive Director of Data One. So the primary goal of the metadata interest group here is shown in pink fuchsia, is essentially the umbrella group, and we spawned off the metadata standards directory working group, which has actually, it started and ended and is completely done, and it was the precursor to the Metadata Standards Catalog Working Group. The Data in Context is an interest group, and then RD stands for Research Data Provenance Interest Group, because there's a great deal of overlap with that group, and we work with them. We also work with the brokering interest groups and some of the other interoperation services group. So because metadata is involved in so many things, we actually work with quite a few different groups, and at each plenary we always have shared meetings. We had been focusing on the different domains to see if, to get their input, to see if what we were working on made sense to them and to get their input from them. But we work with a lot of different groups. Let's see. Okay, and as most people on the call are aware of, metadata can be used for discovery, contextualization, and access. So the first metadata working group that we had was the Metadata Standards Directory. And let's see, okay, so this is just an overview of all the different things. So the eventual, or the original plan was to do put standards into a Metadata Standards Directory Working Group, and then that forked off the follow-on to that. And this is some of the things that we have been working on, is to come up with a package which is essentially a common set of metadata elements that could be used across different domains, and we're getting feedback on that right now. So a little bit of history. Part of the reason for starting the Metadata Standards Directory is that DataOne had done a lot of survey of researchers, and one of the outcomes of the first survey that we had was when they were asked about what metadata standard they were using, by and large, most respondents said none, and the second largest group said MyLab, meaning whatever they came up with, and not necessarily, and then the actual standards showed up, but again, not in the number of people that were doing either none or MyLab. And so what we thought, and DataOne gets a lot of queries about what metadata standard should we be using. So that was the focus. And Jane Greenberg was involved in the first working group. So our idea was to come up with a directory that would list metadata standards. And as we were getting the group going, we found out that there actually, one already existed at the Digital Curation Center in the UK. And they had a metadata standards directory, and it still exists today. And it's divided up. This is for humans to search, but it's divided up by discipline, and it has links to the standard, it has some use cases, it has links to the tools that you can use with it. But the problem with that is that there was no longer any funding to keep it up. And what we found out when we proposed our group was that people they would go here and then they'd say, well, there's some errors, and they wanted to be able to correct it. So the whole outcome from the Metadata Standards Directory Working Group was that we actually implemented this standards directory from DCC in GitHub to make it much easier for people to update, add new standards to the directory if they weren't already there. So what we've done is to have a sustainable, community-driven metadata standards directory. So we do review all the suggestions that come into the GitHub version of that directory. And if they're fine, then we go ahead and add them to it. And this is a way of sustaining a directory. There have been at least 15 new standards added to what was previously there, and many corrections have been made and additions. If there were new tools that could be used with a particular standard, those have been added. So we also requested use cases for how people wanted to use a metadata standards directory. And one of the things that came out of that was that people wanted not only a human readable directory, but a machine readable, so that it could be used both ways. And that is what led, oops, sorry, wrong way. And that's what led to the follow-on catalog group. Another outcome of the metadata groups were to come up with a set of principles about metadata, and those are the ones listed. And basically, the only difference between metadata and data is the way they're used. So to say that metadata is data about data really is too limiting. And that's why we wanted to include the first principle that it's out there. And these are not unique to just our group. A lot of different groups are coming up with principles about metadata. The other thing is to make people aware that metadata is also, you can have metadata about users, you can have metadata about software services as well as computing resources, and that it's not just for description and discovery, but also contextualization, and also a way to do a virtual research environment so that you can have software and computing resources available to people too. Again, it needs to be machine understandable and readable, as well as by humans. And it's also the management metadata is also very important. And a lot of groups in Europe track the research infrastructure, so they keep track of grants, funding opportunities, experts in their particular area. Some universities in the US do it, but not to the degree that the Europeans are doing it, which is actually another good thing about RDA, is it gives you a chance to collaborate with people internationally and not just in the US. So the follow-on group that is active right now is the Metadata Standards Catalog, and we have 89 members from across the world representing many different groups, functions, researchers, librarians, data archivists. We started in January of this year, and we have to be finished by July of 2017. So we started with the standards directory from the last working group, and we're adding new detail and functions to that. So this includes a schema level information and also an API for the machine access. So the elements that we came up with are listed here. And if you go to the website, there's actually a lot more information about this, but this is the key set of elements that we are trying to find out if, and getting feedback on these, if these are sufficient and will work across different domains. I think one of the interesting things, the feedback we got, especially on spatial coordinates, were we had people from astronomy, and they gave us some really good feedback that spatial coordinates really weren't relevant to their area. So anytime you try and go across domains, it becomes really, really challenging. But we had to start somewhere, and this is where we're starting. So of those elements, some of them are single value, but not all of them are. And you also have to be able to handle different languages. And so what we are working on now is structured metadata, more along the lines of a relational database, so that you can capture not only a particular moment in time, but the temporal aspect of metadata, so that someone can be in a role at one point in time, but then at another point in time, somebody new could come into that role. So in addition to those elements, we have to be able to structure them such that you capture all the information that you need about that, the relationships and the time element. So here's how we did. We started out with use case templates, and actually the data in context interest group is the one that worked with us to come up with the use case templates. And there'll be if you go to the RD Alliance website and go to the metadata interest group, you'll see all the different things that I'm referring to here. So, so we started out with use case templates that listed elements that the various use cases used. We extracted the comment and required elements. So the use cases, the template asked whether they were required or just nice to have. So we went through all those and analyzed the use cases, came up with, we extracted the common and required elements, and then tried to figure out the structure using semantic linking, and then reduced that to that minimum set that I just showed you. And all these different worksheets are available from the website. And this is just shows you what they're like. But what we found out is when we first started out with use cases, using just descriptive language or a Word document was not very helpful. It makes analyzing use cases very difficult, which is why we came up with a template to use. And actually, that was a side effect of our working group, is that other groups have actually picked up our template and refined it for their use too, and they found that it's much easier to analyze use cases if there's a template involved. So where we are right now is we have a draft data model out, and that draft data model is in the Metadata Standards Catalog Working Group webpage on the Research Data Alliance. And we also have 2 proposals for a disciplinary taxonomy. And what we are doing now is requesting feedback and comments on those, on the draft data model, as well as the 2 draft proposals for the disciplinary taxonomy. In addition to this, we also found out that people needed more information about the elements that I listed on a previous slide. And so in the Tokyo plenary, that was part of what came out of that, was that a group got together and worked on better definitions of those elements so that people would know what we're talking about and be better able to give us some comments and review on that. So I wanted to let you know that the next plenary will be in April in Barcelona, Spain, and you can find out all the information about this. And they're also looking for, until actually next week, actually 27th, which I think is a Monday, they're looking for other groups that want to co-locate with this plenary to have their meetings. Usually there are workshops before and after the RDA plenaries. And it also has all the information about how to register for the meeting and just the information, the logistics information for it. The plenary, there are 2 RDA plenaries a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. The one in September following the Barcelona plenary will be back in North America, in Canada, in Montreal. So that should be a meeting that's probably easier to get to than Barcelona. I encourage you to sign up to become a member of any of the RDA groups, but in particular, if you're interested in metadata, please join the Metadata Interest Group or the Metadata Standards Catalog Working Group if you'd like to get involved with that. And although I'm co-lead of the Data in Context Interest Group, I am spread way too thin, so I have been looking for help giving up my co-lead of that particular group. So if data in context is something that interests you, please do get in touch with me. I have a volunteer from Australia and the Netherlands, but that would mean that that particular interest group is doesn't have anybody from the US co-leading it anymore. So if anybody's interested in it, do let me know, and I would tell you what's involved and how you can get involved. And that's it.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Rebecca, and for letting us know about everything that's going on in RDA metadata world. Certainly appreciate it. I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that anyone may have had about the presentation.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hey, Rebecca. Oops.
Oh, hi, Ted.
Thanks a lot. Couple things. You mentioned sort of the in the relational model when you were naming, you were talking about the same person being used in different places in the record and things like that. It seems similar to this idea that we implemented a while ago at NOAA called components, where we then we wrote metadata for a person or an organization or a set of keywords or something like that just once, and then we were able to reference it multiple times from multiple records. I'm just trying to connect what you were talking about with some of the things that we've been thinking about, both at NOAA and then other places. But is that connection correct?
It's definitely the start. So how would you handle the situation where, let's say that the person, like the creator of a data set, changes over time? Mm-hmm. Would you be able to track when that change took place but not lose track of the history of who was in that role? In the most recent version of ISO, we added to the responsibility class an extent, and that extent is both temporal and spatial. So we did that for people in any role anywhere in ISO. You can now specify that person's responsibility in terms of time and space as subsets of the data set. So you could have a situation where you have a data set that's global, and one person or organization maintains, say, the North American part of that data set, or the U.S. part, or the Canadian part, or something, and another group or organization controls or is responsible for the European or Asian, or however you wanted to divide that up. And each of those responsibilities could vary as a function of time. So in the way that that's implemented
in ISO, you could certainly do that even with components, where you would have people or organizations with different temporal or spatial extents of responsibility. So,
Perfect. No, that sounds exactly what we need.
yeah, that was why we did that in in the federal government data centers where I had a little of experience. There were a number of people that were retiring, and we know that the graying of the federal workforce is an interesting problem. But so we had to have a temporally varying responsibility.
Good. That's good to know.
The other thing about the use case templates. So the use case templates are a set of metadata elements that are either required or recommended for addressing a particular use case. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Very similar to some of the work you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it provides an interesting set of what we would call recommendations for different use cases. I mean, that's exactly our definition of recommendation. So it would be interesting to try to apply some of those sort of metadata completeness evaluation ideas to those different use cases.
Yes, actually it would.
With the complexity of multiple dialects also thrown in.
Right, yeah. So you're working on a tool, right? Or is it already done? That allows you to...
One thing about the tools that I work on, they're never actually done.
Okay.
Sort of like metadata catalogs, but yeah, we're working on a tool, and the idea of the tool is that it the easiest to apply is this recommendation analysis dashboard tool that Sean's actually been working on, which allows you to take a metadata collection and compare it with multiple dialects. Or take a metadata collection and compare it to multiple recommendations. Sorry. The dialects that we have are typically in one. The collections are typically in one dialect. But so it would be interesting to try that tool. Maybe we should try and set up something for that next plenary.
That's what I was just going to say. I think that would be really interesting, and a lot of people would be interested in that.
First time, I guess you have to go to Barcelona.
Yeah, I know, it's rough.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe I'll talk to Sean about that.
Okay. Yeah, let me know, because that would be really, really interesting.
Did you say there was a deadline for that?
No. That was only if you want to hold a workshop or a meeting co-located with a plenary. I think the call for sessions just came out today, so there's time to, and I'm going to be requesting a session anyway, so I would love to have this as part of one of the presentations during our sessions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, any other questions? I'm going to mute again and turn it back over to Sean. Thanks again, Rebecca. That was really interesting.
Oh, thanks, Ted. So, Sean, I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay. Okay, can you all see the wiki page that I put up for the documentation sessions for Winter 17?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'd like to make sure that you are all aware of a slight change to the three sessions that, or the 4 sessions that we had are changing to 3 sessions moving forward. The first 2 proposals that are listed here, the Improvement Lab and the ISO building blocks, are going to be combined into a session that is going to be directed at showcasing ways that the ESIP Wiki is used as a place to provide documentation guidance. So we'll include some of the ways on how you would use a recommendations analysis dashboard to link in with guidance documentation, as well as a new section on the wiki that Ted and John Kozamora have been spearheading. That is, you may have seen before on the NOAA wiki for ISO, the ISO Explorer. It is being redone for the new ISO standard version, and so it'll be an interesting way to be able to connect into documentation that will help guide your creation of the newest version of ISO records. And so then we will also be looking at curation efforts and automating documentation. We do need to think about revising, rebuilding the documentation cluster homepage, and also in a similar vein, we need to create a poster for the cluster so that people who may not be as familiar with ESIP, when they come to a meeting, they can learn about clusters and perhaps find areas of interest that they would like to hook into. So I would be happy to have someone take over that responsibility. And also, we need to think about if there are any of these sessions that we would like to give a talk at. So if anybody has any thing to add on either of those fronts, please do speak up. Or if you have any questions about how things are going, let me know.
Sean?
Ed?
I'm not exactly sure if we've got time in the agenda, but I would, if there is some time, I'd be happy to show a little bit of the new Explorer.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you take a couple of minutes to do that? I think I've put the MI metadata page up.
Yeah, I put a link to it in the chat.
Yep.
So, you want to give me the presenter for a minute?
Sure. All right, you've got presentation.
So many people in this call are no doubt familiar with the, at least the older crowd, with the FGDC graphic, the graphic guide to the FGDC standard. So this was a guide that was created back in the old days for the FGDC standard, and both Anna, Mylan, and I, and many other people that we knew really liked using that guide, and we always talked about doing something about ISO. So on the NOAA wiki, there is something that Anna developed called the metadata, the ISO Explorer, and we're moving that to the ESIP wiki, and then we're updating it at the same time for 19115-1. So the home page, or the starting page for most for this, the highest level page is MI metadata, and that's actually going to have to become MD metadata or something. You know, it's for each class in the metadata standard. There's a table that has background colors. And the background colors are explained down here on the bottom of every page: yellow mandatory, green conditional, blue optional. And each of these things is a click, something that you can click on. And in this case, I clicked on contact. The contact is a CI responsibility in this case. It used to be a responsible party. So responsibility is a new element in 19115. There's a UML diagram which shows what that class and subclasses look like. There's the three properties that exist in, or all of the properties, in this case 3, show up in the table. They each have definitions, and as we build this out, they'll have examples. Then down here is also possible parent elements. So CI responsibility is used in quite a few different places in the standard. So you can click on that possible parent elements and see all the places where CI responsibility is used in the standard. And then we're also working on these guidance pages, and this is a page that we copied over from. Actually, this page existed. The page with this title existed on this wiki earlier, but the idea is these guidance pages would give guidance and examples of how CI responsibility is used throughout the standard. The reason that we're excited about moving this to the ESIP wiki, because we'd like to have members of the documentation cluster or others contribute to building it out and then building it up. There's a single category called ISO Explorer that you can also click on and see all of the pages that are in this category and in the ISO Explorer. And if you then want to look at one of them, for instance, browse graphic, you can click on that and see what the descriptions are for browse graphic. Of course, this red box here means there's a graphic that's missing. We're working on trying to build those out. And then we're also in a category of pages with broken file links. So we're trying to use some of the wiki maintenance capabilities. So all of these are files or pages that currently have missing file links, and a lot of those are graphic files that are missing. So we're working on building this out now, and our hope is to have it, have the framework in place before the winter meeting. So if there are people out there that would be interested in helping either build the wiring or to build those guidance pages, that would be great. And again, in the chat, there is the link to that home page.
Thanks for letting people know some more about that. Did anybody have any questions on the new ISO Explorer, or wanted to reach out and say that they'd take on some of the work?
Yeah, the second group is, of course, more welcome than the first. If you do have desires, you can contact me or Sean, or hopefully attend a session at Winter where we'll talk about this a little bit more. Thanks. So Sean, let's see, you can take back presenter. Thank you.
All right, so we have that session on the ESIP Wiki, and then if you are interested in the curation efforts session, giving a talk, please reach out to Kaylin or myself. And also, if you're interested in the automating your documentation, this seems to be something that's maybe a more NOAA flavor session, and curation efforts maybe more of a NASA, although I do encourage crosstalk. I think that the more diverse we have a cross-section of speakers from all of the different organizations that have a stake in ESIP, the stronger that our sessions will be. Like I said, please get in contact with me. You can do that now. You can do that offline. And then additionally, as I mentioned, the documentation cluster page is in need of a revamp, and I would expect that a good explanation homepage would lend itself to creating a good poster to help get the word out about the cluster in the greater ESIP community. So if anyone has anything to add on that, please speak up now. Otherwise, I think we can go ahead and end a couple of minutes early and keep up that chatter offline. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I will make a recording of this and push it out in case you know of anyone that you would like to share Rebecca's talk with. Please do contact me and get some talks into these sessions. All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Sean.